Okay, friends, I feel like I could have just talked to our guest today and forgotten to hit record. And then we get like an hour in and I realized that we had the conversation without you. So, hey, welcome. Come on in. I am so excited for who you get to meet. I'm sitting here with my new friend, Natalie Franke, who I was just telling her I have been following her for like years and years, like a lot, probably like 8 or something. And so it's just such a treat to get to sit down with her and to get to introduce you guys too. And so anyway, Natalie, welcome to Girls Night.
Thanks for inviting me to Girls Night. I'm here. I brought popcorn. What else do I have with me? Some movies. I've got the latest Taylor Swift album. Where do we want to start? I'm in for it. I'm so excited.
Did you get Taylor Swift tickets or are you feeling as much FOMO?
I didn't, and I can't talk about it without getting really emotional. So, no, I didn't get them. I mean, a lot of people didn't, but I've been celebrating with those who are celebrating and loving all the outfits and living vicariously through all of your, Instagram stories. All of you who are out there.
Yeah. All of you who got tickets. Yeah, I didn't get them either. And I definitely been feeling some FOMO. Although one of her shows in Nashville was the one where it like rained torrentially. Yeah. And so like that night, I remember going, oh my gosh, it's Taylor Swift tonight. I'm so sad that I'm not there. And then I looked outside and was like, this looks not good weather-wise. So that softened the blow for me a little bit. But yeah, anyone who has tickets or has had tickets, enjoy because we're jealous.
Yeah.
Okay, Natalie, tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself.
Yeah. So besides being a Taylor Swift aficionado, I do have other things that I do. So I am a mama bear for small business. I've been an advocate and a small business owner for well over the last decade and a half. I am the Chief Evangelist at a company called Honeybook, which is a fancy way of saying that in that advocacy for our small businesses, I also empower them to understand how to run that business, the operations, the client flow, and teaching. A lot of education kind of falls under that umbrella. I'm also a mom to 2 little miracles, Huey and Harlow. I have a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and I'm married to my high school sweetheart, Hugh. We live in Annapolis, Maryland, which is this little colonial town right on the Chesapeake Bay. And I'm a terrible cook, although I no longer set the fire alarm off when I'm making the kids dinner. And by dinner, I often do mean, yes, gasp, frozen chicken nuggets. But I promise I heat them up first, okay? I promise they're not frozen when I give them to my toddlers.
I was going to guess dino nuggets, like
yes,
dino
we
nuggets.
Love the dino nuggets. We also love the dino nuggets with veggies mixed in. It's like, it kind of makes me feel like I'm doing something good, But all jokes aside, like I know I can't cook very well. I can't teach you on that. But one thing I am really passionate about is helping people to be more courageous, more brave, more gutsy. And so I'm as imperfect as it comes, and yet I embrace it wholeheartedly. And I'm really excited to get to chat with you about it.
I love that so much. Okay, tell me, and this is like, I'm so excited to hear about this. And so everyone else get excited too. This is good. I want to hear about your entrepreneurial journey. Like, how did you give us the, like, and then I did this, and then at this point I did this, and like this led to this. Cause I knew that you were with Honeybook. I know about Rising Tide. I am pretty sure I'm a member of Rising Tide, actually. And so I know about Rising Tide, but I don't know like how even that happened, and I don't know how that jumped to Honeybook. So, and I'm using words that most of our listeners are like, what is a Honeybook and what is a Rising Tide? So yeah, catch us up.
Yes. So I was in my junior year of high school when my mom bought me a camera. And that is where it truly begins. My entire life changed when I realized that I could take this little black box with a battery inside and a lens on the front of it, and I could capture people's lives. And I fell in love with photography. And so I started a photography business. That's truly where my entrepreneurial journey began. And I was photographing weddings as soon as I graduated from high school. I used that business to pay my way through undergrad at Penn. And I would go to school Monday through Friday. I was studying the brain. I was studying visual neuroscience, psychology of seeing. I'm a huge nerd and I love understanding how our mind works. And then on the weekends, I would take the train from Philadelphia back home to Baltimore and Annapolis, and I would photograph weddings. And I did this rinse and repeat all through college. At the end of that college year, my senior year, I decided not to go get a full-time W-2 job and instead take this chance and take that diploma, by the way, and kind of like hide it and pretend like, I wasn't leaving an Ivy League degree to become an artist. But I did. And I went full-time into this business and built it, to a multi-six-figure wedding photography business by, a year after graduation. And what I realized rather quickly in that experience was you can hit every success metric in the book. You can check every box that the world would say, oh, that means she's made it. And you can still feel completely alone. And that is where I landed after launching that business full time after college. And that is what initiated Rising Tide, which was essentially my kind of shout into the void of saying, I'm tired of struggling with isolation and loneliness and hustling for the sake of hustling. I need community. I need people. I need relationships. I need to know that this purpose that I'm pursuing isn't in vain, that we are all doing this together and we're trying to make an impact on this world. And so I put that call out into the world, and very quickly other business owners answered. And it was like a little spark of loneliness that caught fire into this, massive flame. And we started meeting for coffee in my hometown of Annapolis. And then other people wanted to meet up with business owners in their hometowns. And rather quickly, Rising Tide went from an idea, a single coffee meetup, to 400 chapters meeting every month around the United States and the world with the shared values of community over competition, of saying we might compete in the business space, but at the end of the day, we are people and we put people first and we put community first. And so Rising Tide within about 6 months had scaled to a couple hundred chapters. We were like maybe just over 100, maybe it was like not quite 2. And that is where Honeybook entered the picture. And so we were trying to figure out how the heck to make this community sustainable. We had built it as a passion project. It's free. So it was never monetized, never charged for meetups, never charged for resources. Everything was volunteer in and out. And so we recognized rather quickly when it started to scale to that magnitude that we needed to figure out a way that, it's one thing when your side hustle that's like a passion project then becomes the full-time job and you didn't realize it as it was happening. And that's kind of where we landed. So we partnered with Honeybook initially, and then that led to an acquisition. And Honeybook actually acquired Rising Tide. And it was part of Honeybook's company umbrella for years and years and years. And this is like very new news, very much breaking news. But this year, Honeybook actually has given the IP back to the leaders, and the leaders have moved forward with creating a nonprofit. So Rising Tide, as of 2023, is going to be moving forward as an official nonprofit status, which is kind of wild and unheard of in the business world, but I think very true to both Honeybook's values and the heart behind this community and the leaders that want to see Rising Tide continue on to do amazing things in a nonprofit, way. But ultimately that led to Honeybook. And so I've gone from photographer to community builder to working in tech to empower those businesses that I love so much. Kind of at the end of the day, just trying to create a world that is better than the one that I found. I want to create a world and be a contributor to that change where anyone can pursue their passion and can build a life that is rooted in purpose. That is what I want. And I see entrepreneurship as one of the ways to get there. And so that's kind of my journey from, starting as a photographer all the way through where I am today, working with Honeybook and publishing books like Built to Belong and Gutsy.
I love that so much. I love that so much. And really, I feel like that's what I first discovered Rising Tide like really early in my entrepreneurial journey. And it was through mastermind sisters of mine, one of whom is a photographer. And it was just having them and then having I feel like you guys pioneered this idea of getting to do this solo work together. And I really have never felt, I don't think ever felt lonely in being a small business owner because of that. And that's just a really cool thing because it is a very lonely, weird thing to do a job that nobody else understands. So thank you for that. I love that. I have so many questions because I know that I'm a small business owner. I have been for, upwards of a decade. And I know that a lot of the women in our community are small business owners, but I know that we also just more than being small business owners, because we're not a community of entrepreneurs, but we are a community of dreamers. And so I know that the women in our community have something that they are pursuing or something that they're dreaming about that they haven't started pursuing yet. And because you've walked so many people through this, I want to just kind of pick your brain about a couple of different roadblocks that we encounter on this journey, and like how to get over them so that we can like get a move on, And so the first thing I wanted to ask you is, you have partnered with, or you've worked with more than 100,000 independent businesses in their journey towards success, whatever that looks like for them. What are some of these common roadblocks that you see people facing?
Yes, I wish we had all day because there are so many roadblocks. And what I will note is you're 100% right on the kind of framework of saying, I know I've worked with entrepreneurs, but this applies to everyone. I talk a lot. There's a section in the book, actually, where I talk about something like subordinate language. What the heck is that? Subordinate language is using the word like just. I'm just a photographer. I'm just a stay-at-home parent. We as women put that word just in front of everything that we do. I'm just checking in. Because in order to make ourselves more palatable and more pleasing and more acceptable to the world, we find subordinate language as a vehicle to diminish our impact in what we're trying to do or say. And I bring that up right at the outset of this because when we talk about roadblocks, one of the biggest roadblocks that we aren't often aware of, but yet I see impact people day in and day out, is the mindset roadblocks of things like the work I do doesn't matter. The impact I make isn't substantial enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not capable. Is anyone going to care if I do this thing? Or will anyone believe I'm even able to do it? What will other people think? Will they judge me? What if I try and I fail and I let people down? And notice in all of those trains of thought, I not once mentioned entrepreneurship. These roadblocks impact us in every way, in every season differently. I shared recently with a friend how last Halloween was my first Halloween with having, my son in preschool. And it was the first time I experienced the wide array of Halloween costumes that kids have. And I felt inadequate from the minute I watched that parade start at the preschool, because here I had a newborn baby, I was postpartum, and I just bought a Big Bird costume. Like I just bought a costume. I was like, my son will love this. Here we go. I bought it. And I get to this preschool and every mom there had made the most beautiful costumes. They were creative. They were innovative. They were puns and they were witty. And I'm sitting there like staring at my little Big Bird and feeling like, did I fail him as a mom? Am I not enough? Am I not showing up in the way that he needs? And those doubts, those fears, those insecurities start creeping in. The roadblocks that we face are very rarely external and very much so internal. We like to think it's things like failure. Right? Failure is the reason we're not achieving our dreams. Failure is the thing keeping us from pursuing them. But the truth of the matter is, more dreams never begin than end in failure. More dreams are stifled before they even have a chance to take root and to bloom. And so often that comes from many of the fears that I work to confront when I work with entrepreneurs and when I talk to myself on a daily basis. I write about this, not because I'm an expert, because I'm a lifelong student. And, I think it was really kind of that train of thought that led to writing Gutsy. So I'm here for any of the above, any of those roadblocks, but I can tell you very often we like to place blame on things that aren't really the roadblocks. And what I just mentioned tends to be at the root of much of what holds us back and much of what keeps us stuck.
Yeah. I feel like we could sit together at the parade because my kids just, I got them like onesies. I actually highly recommend this. I got them super soft, like animal onesies. So one of my girls was a pig, one of them was a duck. And they're super comfy and they wore them for like months and months and months afterwards. And they were super cuddly, but it was like one-stop shop, got them from Amazon. And so when probably this year I get to the preschool parade, I'm going to be there with the Big Bird costume, and I will be thinking of you.
Think of
two
me.
Big Birds.
Anyone who shows up to a preschool parade or a party and feels inadequate, just remember me. Remember me in my Big Bird costume.
Yep. I'm going to come with a store-bought one. I don't have the time or skill for that. Okay, so you mentioned your book, which I meant to mention a long time ago. Let's stop and talk about it. You have a new book called Gutsy, and the subtitle is awesome. It's Learning to Live with Bold, Brave, and Boundless Courage. Tell me, how did this, we've kind of talked about what some of the book is about, but tell me how this book, happened.
Yes. So this book is the book that I wrote because I recognized that if I was going to leave one thing to my kids, one bit of legacy, one bit of wisdom, what would it be and what would I say to them? And I realized it's what I wish I could say to my younger self. Gutsy is the book I wish I had when I was in my 20s. And heck, I still need, I literally reread part of it this morning, even just to remind myself. I wrote this book because I recognize that each human being on this earth has been given such a beautiful opportunity to make an impact, is created uniquely and gifted and equipped specifically for what they are meant to do. And yet most of us are shrinking back, holding back, remaining quiet, keeping ourselves stuck and stagnant rather than moving forward boldly, doing the things scared, right? Pursuing what we are called to pursue. We hold ourselves back, and we are often that roadblock that keeps us from moving into the impact that only we can make. And I wanted to write a book about courage, but I wanted to write an honest book about courage. And there's a section in Gutsy. I will say, it's my first book, Built to Belong, was about community. That's like a sweet bell pepper. Gutsy is a spicy habanero. It is a kick in the pants. It is a little bit fiery. So if you want a little bit of that fire, definitely pick up this book. If you want someone to walk alongside you and help you to be more bold and courageous in your life, also, yes, pick up this book. There's a part though in Gutsy when I'm talking about honesty where I say, stop caring about what other people think is terrible advice. Because you can't. That's the type of honesty I'm talking about here. I go into the neuroscience behind why human beings will always care about what other people think, how it is not a bug, it's not a mistake. There is no mistake made about you. It is wired into your brain for a reason. We talk about that in Gutsy, for example. And so I wanted to write a book that really got to the heart of the issue, that didn't beat around the bush, that didn't give you some sort of false idea of how to overcome this thing that somehow is a mistake or a flaw in your design. Because there is nothing flawed about it. It is wired into you for a reason, and that is okay. But it's important for us to acknowledge that even though that is a part of who we are, we will always worry about what other people think to some degree. We will always care about the opinions of those we respect and admire. We will always look to other human beings as a mirror to ourselves. This is all built in. We don't have to allow that, though, to keep us from making the impact that only we can make. And sometimes when that concern spirals and becomes an obsession where we're scrolling and comparing, or where we're starting to let those feelings of inadequacy keep us from really owning the beauty of our lives, the gratitude that we deserve to feel for waking up every morning and doing the work and loving the people that only we can love and making the impact only we can make, right? That's where we have to address it. And so all of that to say, Gutsy is a book for anyone who has ever felt stuck, has ever procrastinated, has ever looked at somebody else running after a dream and wished it was them. Gutsy is the book for the version of you that you truly are, not the person you think you should be, not the person the world expects you to be, not the impossible pressures that you put upon yourself every day, but the reality of how miraculous you truly are just by taking breath every morning when you wake up. And it also is a book that will, like I said, kick you in the pants to recognize those things and then still get after the things that you want.
Okay, we don't normally go in this order of things here on Girls Night, but tell us when the book comes out and where we can buy it, because I feel like that's what everyone's thinking right now.
Yes, so the book is coming out August 15th. We perfectly timed it for back to school. Not that back to school is a season that everyone experiences, but it's kind of a mental reset. September and end of August when vacations are done and summer is over, that's where a lot of us are like, okay, I've only got a couple months left in the year. This feeling is creeping up where I want to do something. I want to reset. I want a fresh start. So August 15th, it hits shelves. You can pre-order it anytime before then. And it's available everywhere that books are sold.
All right, we're going to link to that in our show notes because we all now are obsessed and need a copy. So that's how that goes. This is maybe a side note, but you guys, we have authors on the show a lot. And I don't know that we as readers realize how important it is for books and for authors to have pre-sales. When you, like, the kindest thing you could do for someone who you follow, who you follow them on Instagram, read their stuff, listen to their podcast, whatever, if they have a book coming out, like, the kindest thing you can do for them is to pre-order a copy.
It's so true.
Followed by leaving a review, sharing about it. But really, it is a hug for every author to pre-order their book.
Authors like to say pre-orders are our love language and reviews are our second love language. But no, you're spot on. Yes.
It makes such a difference. So let's do that for each other. Okay. So you mentioned what people will think. And actually, I guess before we dive into that, one of the fears that I think, along with I can't do this, which I think we all feel, there's this piece that is really hard to get over that is somebody else already is.
Yes.
And it might be that they're doing it better and I can't compete, or it might be they're just doing it. Everybody knows about them. There's just not room for me. What have you learned about that?
Yeah, I have a very firm belief that the best books are not even on the shelf. I believe the best books were never written. I believe the best businesses were never built. I believe the best ideas were never spoken aloud because somebody had that exact thought. Somebody said, but they've already done it. But they've done it better. But who am I? And I really want that to resonate and I really want that to hit home. There is someone out there that needs to hear that right now. Because I guarantee you there is somebody listening to this that has an idea or, has something to say that could change someone's life, that could save someone's life, that could change the world, and they choose not to speak it for that exact reason. And, it is so important for us to remember that, those little inklings, those intuitions, those nudges are not by accident. Those feelings of, wanting to do something, wanting to pursue something being laid on your heart is very, very often indication and should be indication enough that there is room for you. And that's the most important thing to remember in all of this. It doesn't matter whether 1 million people have done that exact same thing before. No one of those people is you. No one can do it like you. No one will say it like you. No one has lived through the things that you've lived through. No one has overcome the things that you have overcome. You have an ability to transform somebody else's life. And even if it's only one person, isn't that more than enough? That's the truth. That's what I have to say to it. I'll share one little personal story here. Some of you, if you have been following me, 5 years ago, I went in for neurosurgery to remove a benign brain tumor. And that surgery is very much the reason that I have 2 miracle babies. Prior to that, fertility treatment centers wouldn't even treat me because of my tumor. I write about this in Built to Belong, but the best doctors in the world wouldn't help me to conceive with my husband. We had been married. Now we've been married for over a decade. We've been together for 17 years. And there were years and years and years there where I truly thought that we wouldn't even get the chance to try for babies because of this brain tumor. I go in for surgery 5 years ago and I have a successful removal of this tumor. 6 months after that, I'm cleared to start trying for a baby. And well, if you look at any of my photos on social, you can see that there are 2 miracles now that I never thought God would give me. I never thought I would have. And I share all of that, not to tell you about my story, but to tell you about someone else's. And that is the first woman who ever went in for that surgery. I had the opportunity to connect with a young woman. Now she's a little bit older than me, but not by much, which is so mind-blowing. But she was the experimental case who raised her hand to do that surgery, to give herself a chance at having that pituitary tumor removed. And because she raised her hand to do that thing, she changed my life. She took a bold, brave risk. She didn't know what the outcome would be. She believed that for science, maybe the doctors could learn how to perform this procedure better and better and better and give more people the opportunity. She never had children, was never able to have them. And I do. Sorry, makes me, I say that because there are risks that we will be called to take. And we have a choice whether we take them or not. That's our free will. That is up to us. Doesn't have to be something as massive as brain surgery. But what I am saying is that you shouldn't underestimate the risks you are called to take. You have no idea whose life will be impacted. Even if somebody else has launched a podcast, even if somebody else has written a book, even if somebody else has created a food blog about dairy-free living, you have no idea what mama is going to have a baby and find out she has to go dairy-free because she wants to keep breastfeeding. And your blog is going to enable her to breastfeed her infant. And I'm speaking yet again from a personal experience. Thank you to all of the food bloggers out there who shared their dairy-free recipes so I was able to breastfeed my daughter Harlow. Don't doubt your impact. Even if someone else has done it, they aren't you, and you are being called to take that risk for a reason.
I feel like we could just stop there. Thanks for sharing that. I think one of the things that kind of happens to me as I record interviews for Girls Night is questions pop into my head and I'm like, okay, the crowd is wondering, this is the next question that the crowd is wondering. And I feel like as you were talking about the fact that the best ideas, the best books haven't been written, the best businesses haven't been started because someone downplayed it and didn't take the leap. I feel like we need to know, how do we know if the idea that we're going to, if this idea is amazing or if it's a flop? This is such a random story, but we're going to welcome to Girls Night. We're going to do tangents. Last night, my husband was making us dinner. Thank you, because I can't cook. And we were watching Shark Tank. It was just on. And a guy was talking about how early in his career, he was paid for some freelance work, or he did some freelance work for this guy. And he was offered either the guy was like, I can pay you or I can give you some equity. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I can give you some equity in my company. And the guy had just had a baby. His wife had just had a baby. And so his wife is like, we need money. I don't want a piece of this guy's whatever business. And so he passed up the equity, took the cash, which was probably $1,000, maybe. Mm-hmm. And the company was Under Armour. And the sharks were like, how much would that be worth now? And he's like 285 million, something like that. Number that's probably really stuck in his head. And so I guess the question though is that wasn't a bad decision. That really was a roll of the dice. You have a new baby. You need to feed yourself, your family, your baby. You need money. And so you do some work, you take the cash, because it really could have been this business that never turns into anything. And so I feel like we're wondering that for ourselves. How do I know if this is a good idea or not? How do I know if this is something that really, what you were saying before with, if it makes an impact on one person, that's enough. And so it's that, I guess maybe I just answered the question. Okay, I'm going to let you talk.
No, I love that. And I love the Under Armour story, because what's so interesting is I hear that and I know everyone's first reaction is something along the lines of, oh gosh, that's, he should have made the other decision. But had he made the other decision, had he made the decision to go with equity, he probably wouldn't be standing in front of the sharks, launching something new, creating something new, hungry for his next idea. And that can be the very idea that impacts the exact person who is meant to be impacted, could make even a greater impact, right, than any amount of millions on millions on millions of dollars. Yes, it would be nice. Yes. But I also believe that, our stories can't be summed up in one good decision, right? Or one bad decision. I was actually starting to read Jon Acuff's new book that's coming out in a couple of months this fall. And there's a part in there where he's like, have you ever gone, you make 35,000 decisions every single day. Has anyone ever gone 35,000 for 35,000 on a Monday? Is what Jon Acuff said. He's like, no, of course not. No one has. And so I say that to say, how do you unpack, is this going to be a success or not? And my answer is, you won't know. You won't know. But yet again, a couple things to learn from this. One, that right there is what keeps people from even getting started. People wait until it's perfect. People wait until they're sure. They are absolutely certain that this idea is going to be successful before they start. And by that point, it's far too late. You have to leap not knowing. That's what faith is all about. Now, the important part here, though, too, on the flip side, is that it requires us to reframe our relationship with failure. We cannot see failure as the end. We have to see failure as a necessary stepping stone towards our greatest success. We have to see success as something we actually build on the foundation of those failures. When you go into anything, whether it's parenting, a relationship, a business, knowing you're going to make a ton of mistakes and you may never get it perfect. You probably won't. I don't even think it's possible to get anything in this life perfect. But you will eventually get some things right. And those things will be the things that matter. When you go into anything with that mindset, you are setting yourself up for the very type of success that you are looking for. Again, not hoping that it's going to be exactly what you expect the first time around. The first time you do anything, it should be the worst version of it. We were talking about books before we hopped on, right? And you're like, I'm in the writing. I mean, it is rough right now. And I said, good, it should be. Do you know how many people don't even start to write the first draft because they think it sucks? Most. So you sometimes have to create that bad first draft. And you might not even know it at the time. I mean, I go back and read my first book, which I'm proud of. I spent a huge chunk of my life researching, learning, and crafting that. And yet I can still tell you my second book is 10 times better than my first. And it should be. Every iteration should be improved from the iteration before it. That's a natural progression of how we live. And yet we so often think, but if I don't get the first thing right, then the whole thing is a failure. And I think it's so important for us to reframe our relationship with that. I share one story in the book with the CMO of Honeybook, Dan, who has just become a mentor for me. And he was truly my first big boss I was ever very nervous to work for. Because again, entrepreneurial girl here, I've never interviewed for a job in my entire life. That's just not my world. So for me to be nervous about a boss was a new experience for me. By the way, I mean, he's worked at change.org. He's worked at Google, at big companies all across Silicon Valley. Barack Obama follows him on Twitter. This guy's legit, okay? So I was right to be a little intimidated. We sit down for our first meeting and Dan Visnick looks around the room at the entire marketing team and he says, does anyone know how many swings it takes for a professional baseball player to hit a home run? And I'm thinking this is like a Harvard interview. You hear rumors about these types of interview questions where they ask you something you're not supposed to know the answer to see how you calculate and quantify and, try to problem solve. So here I am panicking, how many swings at bat? And he just kind of stops all of us before we spiral into a complete pandemonium. And he says, look, the number of swings doesn't actually matter. That's not the point. What I'm trying to say here is that for a professional baseball player to even hit the ball, they're going to miss a lot. Then of those balls that they hit, most of them are never going to be a home run. It's a rarity. It's a moonshot that when their bat actually connects with the ball, that it even progresses the game forward. And these are professional baseball players. These are people who make their entire living playing the sport. And so the point of that story and the reason for what he calls the batter's box every single week on the team is to create an environment where we know we're going to miss and we're going to miss a lot. And instead of being afraid of the failures, we actually celebrate them. Instead of assuming that we're going to hit a home run every single time we step up to bat, we know that that's a rare moment and we appreciate that moment all the more for it because of the misses that it takes to get there. And so every week on the team, he actually kicks off a series called Batter's Box, and he makes different team members share what they failed at that week, what tests they ran that didn't turn out the way they expected, what learnings we have, what we can do better. And there is always things, that we want to do better. And I really just fell in love with that version of cultivating a culture, really like a team culture, a community culture, a company culture of embracing failure. And so it's a practice. I would encourage folks to do that. Ladies, if you're listening to this, what did you fail at this week? What did you do that sucked? What did you go out and try and attempt to accomplish and it didn't turn out the way that you thought? Did you show up to preschool Halloween and realize everyone else made their costumes and they're 10 times better than yours? And great. Let's start celebrating those little moments of failures, those little mistakes, those blips, those insecurities even, because the moment that we shine a light on that failure, it loses its power over us, right? Light drives away so much of what holds us back and keeps us stuck. So I know that's a long answer, but all of that to say, I think reframing our relationship with failure is a huge learning that it takes a lot of us a lifetime to uncover.
I love absolutely everything about that. I heard someone say one time that business is an experiment. It's run it as an experiment. Run everything as an experiment. Like, let's see if this works, because one out of every however many times it's going to, but you don't know if it's going to unless you give it a shot. Well, I talk about that a lot actually with dating, that, I mean, out of every, you're going to have a terrible batting average with relationships. Like, best case scenario, one of them works out, and you might be the person who, you know, who marries your high school sweetheart. Like, you don't have as many dating disasters as I do. But like, also, I would say that I learned from all of them, and they've been, you know, really shaping in who I am. And so like, you had other things work in your life in that same way. But yeah, it's you literally are making it, you're killing your chances altogether if you don't even try. And you have to try a lot if you're going to succeed, even once. And I love that. I love that reminder. And two, I think, you know, one of the other things that I think we feel is when we fail, it does feel like it's like God or the world or our market or our audience or something telling us to like give up. Like, it's not, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen. Like, you really need to just like throw in the towel on this. And I think that that's something that I've wrestled with forever. Like, really forever, is when something doesn't go the way that I'm hoping it will, instead of being like, well, okay, that didn't work. It's like the walk I have to take is, does this mean I shouldn't be doing this work? Does this mean I'm not cut out for this? Does this mean I'm not called to this? Does this mean that like I'm not good enough? Does this mean, really, is this like God and my, you know, readers and, you know, whatever, telling me like, seriously, just like throw in the towel. This isn't for you. That's the walk that I like have to take. The walk's gotten faster. Like my recovery time has gotten faster over the years. But like, how do we know if we're like beating a dead horse? Or if this is like a necessary step on something that we're supposed to do.
Making hard decisions is the hallmark of adulthood. And I talk about discernment quite a bit in Gutsy. And there are some frameworks in there that I think are really helpful if you are in that place where you're sitting there thinking like, do I say yes or do I not say yes? In both big decisions, like I talk a lot about fertility treatment in particular. And like, there was really like, every path forward had pain. Every path forward was going to be hard, and every path forward was a different unknown. But I chose the unknown. I chose which pain I was willing to endure. And so I say that to say, like, you know, you truly may never know, even in retrospect, but especially in the moment of making that decision, you know, which path is ultimately going to lead you forward, and whether you should, like, whether being brave, and I talk about this in Gutsy, whether being brave means fighting and being resilient and, you know, working through the challenge that sits in front of you, or whether the bravest thing you can do is actually quit. The bravest thing you can do is actually give up. And there are going to be moments in your life where, and it is a bizarre feeling, where you realize you've been clinging to something that is no longer serving you. You've been holding so tight to something that is comfortable but broken. And it can be a business, it can be a relationship. Do you know how many people hold on to a toxic relationship because the thought of being single is absolutely more terrifying to them than enduring the toxic relationship that they know? This is a very human reality. By the way, it's in our brain. Like, this is not, there's nothing broken with you if this is how, you know, you navigate, because we all do this. We cling to our comfort zone because the unknown, even if the unknown is better, is far more terrifying to us. And it's very hard for us as humans to make that leap in so many different ways. It's why, you know, like I actually talk about in the book skinny jeans for a lighter subject matter. I talk about the fact that when wide leg jeans started to become popular, where parting your hair down the middle started to become popular, I'm a millennial. And immediately I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You will pry these skinny jeans out of my cold, dead hands. Like, I am not getting rid of them, right? And I actually talk about how, you know, like I clung to that with everything I had. And eventually now, do I wear, you know, wider jeans? Of course I do. But it was a journey and a process of getting there. And sometimes—
And like, they're better. But like, pause here.
I mean, you know, as long as it's not low rise at this point, I don't have a problem with it. You know, like, that's the only type of jean I I don't want anyone to endure the trauma of the 2000s era, which was like my formative childhood years. We had Paris Hilton and Britney Spears. And I remember like they're wearing jeans that were maybe 3 inches above the crotch. I mean, low.
It was like the zipper and then the button. And then that's it.
No.
Like no fabric above. Yes.
We're not going back, girls. We're not going back.
We're probably going back. Like,
no,
I don't know. I've yet to put on a bucket hat. The thing about skinny jeans is, I guess I'm thinking about the ones that are like too tight and like kind of itchy. That like it's just, I don't know. I like more comfortable jeans. Let's do whatever comfortable jeans feel like. Let's do that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say as we loop it back to the initial question, though, even with the jeans metaphor, is just that, like, very rarely is a decision a very cold, like, yes or no, move forward or stop today. It's an evolutionary process. And so I think that, we often feel very afraid of the fact that if we give up on something, it says that we failed, that we are a failure if we even go down the rabbit hole of catastrophizing it. But in reality, it's not. It's a pivot. It's a launch pad. It's a learning. It's about reframing that way in which we view the negative outcome of a decision, and discerning it isn't so much about what is right and what is wrong. Very often, like, are there decisions that are either right or wrong? Of course, right? Like cheating, stealing. There are commandments for a reason, my friends. But when
Murder,
it comes to
not great, yeah.
I was trying to not go so dark, but like it's girls' night. We'll just go there.
We're all over the place, yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh my gosh. But my point here being that with those set aside, and like I'm not talking about moral decisions here, but decisions around like whether to take a risk or not in your life, whether to pursue one thing or another. Very rarely is it this would have been the right one and this is the wrong one. It's shades of gray. You can run a pros and cons analysis, all day if you want, but it's more about what's the right decision for you in this season. Right. And I think that's really where you have to land. And so it's about discerning as best you can. You pull in wise counsel. There are all different sorts of steps that work for different people in regards to that discernment process. And obviously we talk about it and there are frameworks in the book, but then at some point you have to make the decision. And that's really where I think a lot of people get tripped up. At some point, whether it is, I'm going to commit and I'm going to fight to make this work and I'm going to do what it takes, or I'm going to try something new. I'm going to let it fall apart. I'm going to quit, right? I'm going to break up with this person. At the end of the day, it's the messy middle that is the most harmful for us in refusing to make a decision either way. We have to be able to discern, to make that decision, to move forward, and to know that something good is always awaiting us. We just have to reframe our relationship with the challenging parts of our story and rewrite that story so that it allows us to propel forward in meaningful ways.
I love that. Something that I've been challenging myself to do is, I feel like I'm a good risk taker, but especially with things that feel vulnerable. Like the more vulnerable the thing, the quicker I'm going to back up from a risk, or the quicker I'm going to decide that it didn't work. And so it's like, we're in summer as we're talking about this, and it's like dipping your toe in the water and then pulling it out and being like, no, it's cold. It's cold. So I'll put my toe in the water, but I'm going to decide pretty quickly if it's cold, because it feels so vulnerable to like actually really give it a shot. And so that's something that I've been challenging myself to do more and more, is when I take a risk, say, I'm not looking for this to turn out in the next week, days, month. Like, I'm going to give this, how long am I going to give this? 6 months of wholehearted pursuit and see what happens at the end of that. Because I think for me, I know that there are things that I'm willing to try. I just sometimes I'm not willing to stick it out to find out if it like actually could have worked if I gave it a little bit more time.
A dear friend of mine who, if you don't know, you will fall in love with, Mary Morantz, has a saying that slow growth equals strong roots. And that the things that we want in life, the things that are worth pursuing in life, take time. And I absolutely know that to be true. I think with the water analogy that you mentioned, like, you kind of dip your toe and you go, oh, it's cold. Never mind. I'm not going in. You shrink back because at some point you perhaps jumped into water that was too cold. At some point you were hurt. At some point you experienced that pain. Someone who's never experienced pain leaps into the pool without testing the water. Somebody who knows that the water might be too cold is the one who dips their toe in first. And I say that because I think there is this beauty and naive kind of excitement that a lot of us experience when we're young, when we're kids, when we don't know that the world can hurt us, when we haven't, been hurt. And part of being gutsy, part of truly living with bold, brave, and boundless courage is uncovering those moments, uncovering the moments where you were made to believe that you weren't worthy or enough. Those moments where you were taught that love was conditional. Like, who made you feel that you had to be more in order to be loved? Who made you think that your brokenness or your imperfections were anything other than beautiful? Who made you feel that way? What was that moment? And why I bring all of this up is not to bring us into a therapy session, but is more so to say that our present is deeply impacted by our past. If you're dipping your toe in the water, it's because at some point you've been in water that was far too cold. You already know. You didn't just see that pool and run into it with your arms flailing in the air with a shout of glee. And that is very much how many of us in adulthood, especially as women, especially approach everything. From relationships to businesses to life, we approach it with our toe dipping in the water. And I get it. And we should, in many cases, be, careful and intentional and discerning. But what ends up happening is we forget that we can ease our way in, right? Like, if it's cold, it doesn't mean that we have to cannonball. It could mean that we take it one step at a time, right? That the slow growth is what's necessary in order to build the roots that are needed for that version of our life to flourish. And I talk a little bit in the book about, we all are different when it comes to risk. There are people like my sister. She was a lacrosse goalie. And I think that goalies in any sport are a very unique type of person. They're a lot like entrepreneurs. They're like, what position I want? I want the one where someone is going to throw a projectile at my face as fast as possible. And I have to block it with like a stick or a racket or my body. Like, I want that position. I want to be in the way of danger at all times. Oh, and I also want to be in the position where it all comes down to me. And if I mess up or make a mistake, I let the entire team down. Right? Like, that is a very different type of risk taker than someone who, doesn't pursue a sport at all, or, would never step foot on that field. And so there are varying degrees of what we are willing to entertain in terms of risk. And I have come to believe that, like, that's okay. And I talk about this right out of the gate. There is no single definition of gutsy. Like, I don't care what the Honorable Merriam-Webster has to say about it. You can't sum up courage in a single definition because, to somebody like my sister, getting in the goal, like, yeah, it requires a dose of courage, but I guarantee there are other things that she's confronted in her life that some of us wouldn't even consider requiring bravery at all, that to her were far harder. And the same may be said for you. I talk about in the book that the same courage that is required for somebody to bungee jump off of a mountain might be a similar type of courage that it takes a different person to get out of bed in the morning during a hard season. And so, I think it's really important too for us to embrace the fact that when we talk about courage, when we talk about those of us who jump and cannonball in or dip our toes in the water, there's again, like a beautiful array of what it means to be brave and take risks and be the gutsiest version of ourselves. And only we can define what that looks like for us. Only we can determine what it means for us to be courageous in any given moment or season. And, I think it's really about like rewriting that story that perhaps we still hold ourselves to when it comes to our past and what we've experienced, the pains we felt, the things that maybe make us pause, that make us hold back, that keep us from being that braver version of us. And if the only thing you do is look in the mirror and say, I am enough, I love myself, I'm going to honor my needs, right? And you start from a place of maybe not even wanting to fix a darn thing about you. You start from a place of just embracing who you are in this moment. And I say, like, it's the most unself-help thing I think I can write in a self-help book, which is like, don't change yourself if you don't want to. If just looking in the mirror and saying, hi, like, I love you and you are enough requires the courage that you have to give it this morning. If that for you is the bravest thing you do today, please know that is gutsy. please know that that is more than many people can say they've done in their entire lifetimes, right?
There's so many times on this show where I feel like I just need to like lay down, like get a blanket and like drink some tea and just like sit and think for a few minutes. Now is one of those times.
I wish I could pass that popcorn I brought like through the microphone
through the screen.
to you.
I know. I want to kind of the last stop on our train here. I feel like we could talk for a million years, but the last stop on our train here is you mentioned earlier that it is wired into us to care what other people think.
Yeah.
And that is something that I have seen hold me back and hold people that I really love back. And it's either, it comes in a couple different forms. Like, what will they think if I try this? Like, who am I? Having someone watch you try something is like really vulnerable. Like, just don't watch this. Just turn around. Let me, like, it's so earnest. It's so like, I don't know. It is so raw to have someone watch you try something, especially if you care about it, which you're not going to try something you don't care about. But then I think we're also, afraid to have people see us fail. So it's like, I'm fine with you watching me try. I cannot let you see this take a turn. And then also we have so many opinions in our lives coming at us. But I think for a lot of us, the things that we want to try don't match up with the expectations other people have for our lives. Yes. I walked away from a college degree as well. And I know that like my parents and your parents, my parents were very supportive. Also, I think there probably was a moment where they're like, you're going to do what? Like that. Oh, okay. So how do we deal with the fact, how do we deal with other people's opinions on what we're doing?
Yes. So there's an entire chapter called The Thing About Opinions. And I wish I had all day to talk about not only what we do about it, but also the science of people's opinions. Because what's really fascinating, and I'll just give a blip of it, is that other people's opinions hold more weight on our lives than we are willing to admit. A lot of us, if you were to ask, like, do you make up your own mind on things? We'd say, yeah, of course I make up my own mind on things. But neuroscience often indicates differently. We make decisions based on an amalgamation of the decisions that other people around us have made. Like I said, human beings are mirrors to one another. It's why, and I talk about this in the book, there's that saying, it's like you are a combination of the people you spend the most time with. You really become who you surround yourself with. In the same sense that I believe today, the modern version of that is that we start to become the opinions that we consume on social media. We start to become the very values that we surround ourselves with. We begin to believe the narratives that we are allowing ourselves to see. I share, stories in the book where maybe you weren't afraid to do something until you saw somebody else do it and you saw they were torn apart. Maybe, there was something you wanted to go after and you never once questioned your ability to do it until a friend said, oh, but isn't that like what so-and-so did? Right. My point being, we are very much shaped by the opinions that surround us. And so we have to do an audit in the spaces where we can around what opinions we're going to allow to impact our lives, allow into, our space, because it changes everything. The opinions that surround us. And I actually talk in the book, I build a framework out on how to build your inner circle, what questions you actually need to ask yourself. And I want you to actually write down, if you've never done it, who's in your inner circle? Who are the opinions that matter the most to you? Take a moment and just think about three people whose opinions carry the most weight in your life, and ask yourself why. And in the book, we talk about some of the things that we often don't acknowledge that maybe carry more weight, like recency and proximity. So sometimes if someone's close to you physically, you give their opinion more weight, right? Recency, if you saw them most recently or you see them frequently, you give their opinion more weight, but that doesn't mean that you maybe should. And so like there are some tough questions in here. It's not comfortable to ask, but when it comes to opinions, it's so important that you craft that inner circle with the same intention, right? That you do anything else that matters to you in your life. I also talk about the fact that the brain drives us to seek opinions that are in alignment with our own. So very rarely are we looking for the truth. We're just looking for other people to confirm what we already think is true. It's called confirmation bias. And it's very, very much one of the things I believe that can pit us against one another unknowingly. And it shouldn't, and it doesn't have to. But I say that to say, also make sure that those in your circle who you're looking to for those opinions, your inner circle, make sure that there are folks in there that maybe have lived longer than you, maybe have a different lived experience than you, maybe have a diverse set of opinions that are different from yours, not so much to align with your opinions, but to challenge you and maybe not change the way that you feel, but maybe actually reveal to you why you feel that way in the first place. The exercise of crafting that inner circle of opinions that you look to might be one of the most important things you do from this episode, because it's the kind of work that truly matters. When we start to pay more attention to opinions that are around us that don't matter, it can drive us so far off course, and even those inner circle opinions should not outshine or outweigh the opinion that comes from within us, right? Our opinion that we hold of ourselves should always be more important than the opinions that others have of us. They're always going to criticize. There will always be people that judge what we do. You can't please the world. You can't. I love the quote that's like, you could be the juiciest peach and there'll still be somebody that doesn't like peaches, right? Like you can be avocado toast, which I adore. And there's going to be a lot of people that don't like avocado toast. And there will be people that, base their entire career off saying millennials can't buy homes because we make too much avocado toast. That's a real thing. So you could be, right, right. Yeah, that's not why we can't afford homes. But all of that to say, like the point here being that there will always be someone with an opinion. It's about ensuring that you know whose opinions really matter to you in your life, that you take the time to kind of vet those opinions. And I walk through how to do it in Gutsy. And also that you really take time to honor your own opinion. And I'll share one last thing here on this subject. You talked about, leaving school to do something that wasn't, you kind of like, I graduated and I went and became an artist. I became a photographer. And I was met with a lot of people that are like, you're going to do what? You just spent 4 years getting a degree at an Ivy League school in neuroscience and psychology, taking impossibly difficult classes, and you're going to become an artist. Like, I don't understand. Is that a smart decision? A lot of people had a lot of things to say about it. And in the book, I write about one of the last conversations that I had with my grandmother, and I debated whether or not to share this. We talk about vulnerability. I don't have a problem often being open and honest, but when it comes to things like this, it feels like a different level of vulnerability. This is a conversation that truly is like one of the last ones I had with my mom, is what I called her, my grandmother. And I can guarantee you that I wouldn't have done any of the things that I've done in my life had we not had this conversation. It was several, months several months after her diagnosis with stage 4 lung cancer. And it was becoming very clear that we were going to lose her. And I was taking, the train back home to step in for my mom and my grandfather, who were the primary caretakers in that final season, right before hospice, came in. And I will never forget, it was shortly before Easter, a Saturday where I came down to spend the day with my grandmother, and we spent the whole day talking about her life. And I asked her all those questions you want to ask somebody that you love, right? And like clinging to time as if I could make it stop moving. And it was one of the hardest but most beautiful days in my life. And I remember towards the end of us sitting at our kitchen table, I could tell she was getting really tired, and I could tell that she needed to rest, and she never wanted to rest. She always was fighting for, no, I'm fine. And I was like, no, Mom, you really need to rest. And so I went, cleared the table. I was putting the dishes in the sink, and I remember turning back around to see her looking at me. And I recognized the importance of this moment. I recognized the weight that it would carry, because it was likely one of our last conversations. And I clung to this need for her approval. I needed so badly to know that I was on the right track. And so I looked at her and I asked her, or said to her, frankly, I don't really remember whether it was a question or a statement, but I said, Mom, I really hope I make you proud. And her response was not what I was expecting. Here I was, thinking this woman who I loved more than life and who loved me, just so much, would say, of course you make me proud. I love you. Yes, you're amazing. But that is not what she said. She looked at me and she said, make yourself proud. Natalie, make yourself proud. Your job is not to make me proud. Your job is not to live your life so that other people put their stamp of approval on you. That is what she was saying. She was saying, go out and live your life to make yourself proud. You know your values. You know what you've been put on this earth to do. You know what you are capable of. People will always have an opinion. They will always have something to say. They will always doubt you and question you and not always align with what you see as your future. But at the end of the day, it is about making yourself proud. And if you do that, you will make me proud. And I have carried that with me in every decision that I have made from that moment onward. When I was looking at the end of college graduation and thinking, everyone expects me to go do this thing, here is who I should be. Here is who I'm supposed to be. And I knew there was that feeling in my gut that that is not what I was supposed to do, that that was a path that was great for somebody else, but not meant for me. I stepped forward to make myself proud. And here's the thing, when you start to do that, when you start to listen to your opinion of yourself, you start to trust your intuition, you pray on it, you reflect on it. Yes, you take in good counsel and wisdom from others. Yes, there's nothing wrong with wanting the people that you love to be proud of you. Nothing wrong with it at all. But when that becomes the default at all costs, and when you become the person that others expect you to be rather than the person that you truly are, when you listen to the shoulds, right? And you think you need to be this and that to everyone at every time, and you're bending over backwards, and people are saying to you, don't break, bend, don't break. You forget that sometimes shattering is a good thing. You forget that sometimes a breakdown is a breakthrough in disguise. You forget that sometimes you have to take the road less traveled. You have to bet on yourself. You have to make yourself proud and lose sight of other people's expectations and opinions in order to find out who you truly are and what you are truly capable of. And that moment with my grandmother was the moment where I really uncovered that for myself. And I don't know that I would be talking to you right now had she not said those words to me. Had she validated me, had she given me the approval I was seeking, had she told me, yes, I love you and I'm proud of you, and here's a pat on the back for being the gold star A+ firstborn child of the millennial generation, and there's so much trauma that many of us firstborn daughters have experienced in that. Like, if she had just said, good job, I wouldn't be where I am. There is a reason that I am where I am. And so much of it is owed to that little bit of wisdom, that it is the opinions that we hold of ourselves and the values that we've built those opinions upon, which I talk about in the book. Values are so critical, that should guide us as our compass, not what, your friend from high school has to say about your life decisions, not what that random person on Facebook has to say about the blog that you're launching or the podcast that you're starting, right? I'll leave it with that.
Natalie, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to link to everything, all of your stuff, because I know that every single woman listening is like, I need this book. I need more time with her. And I just am thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your gifts, because the world is better because you are. So we'll link to everything, you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Oh.